Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is Bottomline Africa. Now let's cross over to South Africa. A group of Kenyan professionals living in South Africa have been reacting to last Friday's Supreme Court ruling to annul the Kenyan presidential election. South African-based filmmaker Clifford Derrick spoke to constitutional law expert Professor Shadrach Guto and Professor James Ogude from the University of Pretoria. Here are their views.
Elections in Kenya have been declared to be null and void by the highest court in the country. If we follow constitutional democracy, the independence of the judiciary, and the rule of law, I think it's very important for us to be able to say, where do we go from here?
Electoral processes are not just about the parties that are taking part. Electoral processes is also about affirming the people. And in this case, it's affirming the votes and the voices of the Kenyan people that took part in the elections. Forget about the parties for a moment. The legitimacy of the process is also about affirming the legitimacy of Kenyans.
In my view, it's going to be very difficult to move through the process, but we have to go through it because we want a society built on constitutional democracy and the rule of law.
Any of us who knows democracy, we know that there are three important elements to any government, to any state. That is the executive, the National Assembly, and the judiciary. And quite often, we take the judiciary very much for granted. And yet, in any constitutional democracy, they are the ultimate arbiters in the event of any crisis. And therefore, perhaps even more powerful than the executive that come and go, than the National Assembly members that come and go.
The courts have made a decision. Let's follow the decision of the courts, but at the same time denounce these insinuations that the courts are a minority.
Well, those are views from the diaspora as far as that Supreme Court ruling is concerned. And here in studio, we still have a panel of Peter Alingo as well as Sam Kamau. And in Uganda, we still have Nicholas Sengombo, who has been very generous with his comments. Now, Nicholas, we just have a minute for you. What are Ugandans saying about that ruling by Kenya's Supreme Court?
Of course, in Uganda, it's it has received it has been received with a lot of excitement because our situation, the last 3 times we've had petitions in these courts, you've heard that there is what we call the substantiality test, that there were irregularities, but it's not substantial enough to lead to an annulment. And then in Kenya's case, it was almost the opposite. They insisted that the judges, in their wisdom, insisted that, the law must be kept right to the letter. So many people are getting excited because of that. They think that maybe it may influence judges in the future. But from my own point of view, if you asked me, I think we still have the challenge that in Uganda, unlike in Kenya, the judges are still beholden to the head of state, at least the comments that you've had and even the practice. Many times the head of state and many of the government officials speak with a patronizing language, and they say these are our judges, whereas in Kenya it's not the case. You remember during the campaign when President Uhuru went in the area of Kisii and said that he had appointed their son. The Chief Justice was very quick to disown him and say that he was not a government project. So, happy, yes, it has shown us that it is possible. But as to whether we can follow the precedent is, I think that's still a very huge mountain to climb we're still a very long way off, but it is quite good, and especially in the days to come, if after the rerun,
Nicholas, I think
there's no violence, it will be something good.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think your point is home and dry, that those who've described that ruling by the Supreme Court as groundbreaking, the first ever in Africa. And I think we have a cartoon or some sort of prediction that has been mocking international observers on the Daily Monitor, and we have it on our screen there. There you go. The international observers, of course, are being mocked by a cartoonist there. And it's something that I would like to hear your comment on, Peter, as we close. Of course, we have a few minutes to go. Those who are mocking international observers, of course, they gave an election a clean bill of health, and then afterwards you've seen that ruling by the Supreme Court, invalidating President Uhuru Kenyatta's election. What can you say about the observers, very briefly?
I think it's unfortunate that observers are being depicted in a manner suggested by the cartoon. This is to downplay their role, really. As I've always said, observers are not busybodies in an electoral context. There is a particular role that they play, particularly domestic observers. When they are efficient, effective, and well organized, then they do proper work in terms of human rights defending on behalf of citizens. They watch the process on behalf of citizens. And if they work well, they are able to deter electoral fraud and help to make the process become a qualitative process. Their checks add to the quality, credibility
and
of the
course,
process.
the critics were saying they got it wrong this time around. Peter, I think we're almost out of time. Some your final comments, please.
Well, I would want to say, incidentally, I was in South Africa when the Supreme Court made its ruling, and we had a meeting of African scholars. And what happened is that there was a lot of excitement and interest around this particular issue, and especially people from different countries actually expressing shock and at times a disbelief that this could happen in Africa. And I wanted to point out one particular conversation I had with a Zambian journalist who told me that they had a similar issue where after a contested election, and the case went to Supreme Court, where they also have 14 days to make the determination.
Just like Kenya.
The Supreme Court just dilly-dallied with the matter, and after 14 days lapse, they actually dropped the case and say that we have run out of time. So what they saw is that in our particular case, and when you talk about the process of democracy, there has to be the arbiters of disputes and conflict when people are unable to agree. And the courts that are in our constitution, the Supreme Court has that responsibility. So the fact that they're able to pronounce themselves to this particular issue, even if there are those people who feel aggrieved and unhappy with the ruling, the good thing is that in Kenya, at least we have seen that progress, unlike Zambia, where the following day, actually after the Supreme Court dropped the case, the president went ahead and was sworn in. So like I said in the beginning, we are making progress here in Africa, even in our own country here in Kenya. What I would say is that the challenges of 2013 that emanated with technology, we try to solve that, although you have created new problems, but I think there is growth and there is progress. So I actually have much to look forward to in terms of the management of our electoral processes, if we can fix.
We're all optimistic. Thank you very much, Sam Kamau, lecturer, journalism lecturer from Aga Khan University, as well as Peter Alingo, who is a researcher with the Institute of Security Studies. And earlier on, we had Nicholas Sengomba from the Daily Monitor in Uganda. If you're just joining us, of course, this is Bottomline Africa, and now our images of the day will sure thrill most royal enthusiasts. Now the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are expecting their third child. Kensington Palace has announced the Queen and both families are said to be delighted with the news, as with her previous two pregnancies. The Duchess, 35, is suffering from hyperemesis gravidarum. I hope I got that right, or severe morning sickness. Catherine is being cared for at Kensington Palace. The Duke and Duchess have a son, George, who is 4, and a daughter, Charlotte, age 2. With the previous two pregnancies, the couple announced them before the 12th month, when most women have their first scan. Her first pregnancy was revealed when she was just a few weeks pregnant with Prince George, after she was admitted to hospital in December 2012. And finally, our final thoughts of the night, that touches on separation of powers as enshrined in the Constitution. The pronouncement by the Kenyan Supreme Court sparked an emotional mix, sending a section of the country into wild celebrations. And of course, there are those who received it with muted disquiet, by those dissenting to the judicial directives by the Apex Court. Now, countless times, the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, retorted that any aggrieved party in the election should seek court redress. That coming from a man whose win was sanctified by the Supreme Court in 2013 sounded like the most responsible thing to do, or under the circumstances, or so it seemed. As soon as the court nullified the outcome, the president went on a verbal frenzy, threatening to, what he said, and I quote, revisit the institution of the judiciary, falling short of saying that he will order a purge of the judiciary for instituting a coup against what he believes is his justifiable win against NASA's presidential candidate Raila Odinga. Now, perhaps Kenya could learn from the Solomonic wisdom of former U.S. President Barack Obama, whose paternal roots are firmly in the African continent. Yesterday, Obama penned a letter to the current President Donald Trump. In his words, and I quote, he said, "We, that is the presidency, are just temporary occupants of this office that makes us guardians of those democratic institutions and traditions." And of course, that is our bottom line editorial. This has been Bottomline Africa, airing it from 10 to 11 every night from Monday to Thursday. Many thanks for watching. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of the night. Bye-bye for now.